A very good afternoon to all the viewers. Welcome back to another episode of BW People HR Voices. Today we have with us Mr. Srinivas Reddy, who is the Managing Director at EPAM Systems India. Mr. Reddy joined EPAM in 2015 as a part of EPAM's acquisition team, and since then he has been instrumental in building high-performance teams in cloud, data, digital, and quality engineering. Having worked for more than 10 years in the United States and 20 plus years in India, Mr. Reddy has an extensive experience working with global customers in various delivery models. Firstly, welcome, Mr. Reddy. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
So for all the viewers, today's conversation will revolve around how swiftly the organizations have been able to transition to the hybrid work model and how has it impacted the overall working of employees in the organization, especially post-COVID. So, Mr. Reddy, let's start with understanding that how do you think the organizations can promote a work-life balance for employees in the hybrid work model, especially when there is a potential blurring of boundaries between work and personal life for remote employees?
Okay. First of all, most things that lead to a healthy work-life balance prior to work from home and then on to these hybrid setup still apply today. Hopefully, employees are taking breaks. They're taking their PTOs, vacations. They're aligning on their work hours with their managers, and their managers and employers are being supportive. I think every employee looks at work-life balance differently. They prioritize this differently, and organizations need to be flexible in accommodating these employee needs. I do think that it's very important that we communicate this flexibility and support across the organization. All employees need to know that they can set their boundaries, agree on the working hours and breaks, and also, communicate their, do not disturb personal time. And they need to be comfortable to do this with their managers and HR without fear that somehow their career growth would be hindered. Now, I understand what you asked me about the blurring of boundaries with hybrid way of working. It does introduce more challenges to both employees and employers. But there are a few things I think we can do. Providing flexibility in work hours is key, and hopefully it is applicable in most business cases. Helping employees with their home office setup goes a long way. And really putting in engagement platforms to connect with them, providing them access to communication tools, messaging platforms, and also regularly to connect to get a feel for their pulse. And I think HR managers, direct line reporting managers should play a key role here. At EPAM, hybrid means a little different for us. We have many of our employees who work maybe 2-3 days a week in the office. We have employees who are working at our customer's office, and we have employees who are completely remote and probably will stay remote. So most of the work that we do at EPAM requires us to work in small independent teams. Part of what we call feature teams or squads, and these teams work directly with our customers. So in our case, we've rolled out an RTO toolkit with do's and don'ts to help our managers and our employees navigate through this hybrid way of working. We have training programs in place. We've rolled out company-wide health and wellness programs. Really, these are like, mental well-being, fitness, stress management, yoga classes, and so on. And at EPAM, we extensively use Microsoft Teams to communicate and collaborate. And we regularly get feedback through internal surveys. We have our HR teams constantly connecting with our employees to get their pulse. So really, I think being flexible and understanding goes a long way in helping our employees achieve, a kind of healthy work-life balance.
So you mentioned that at EPAM, the employees are working in a hybrid work setup as well as on-site and also remotely, completely remotely. So how how is it impacting your performance management systems, your evaluation of the employees in terms of their performances? If we compare an employee who's working on site completely and somebody who's working remotely or in a hybrid work setup.
Okay. Again, I think this is business specific. Now talking about EPAM, what we do is we help our customers build products and platforms. And like I said before, we work as part of small teams delivering to our customers in a very iterative way. Usually every 2 weeks, there is something that we deliver to our customers. So it becomes very clear what people are doing week on week. And what we do is we measure their output and the quality of the output. It's really not about how many hours worked in a week or where you're working from. So it's a little bit easier for us to make sure that we're looking at the right KPIs, metrics, to be able to judge whether people are being productive, adding value to our customers. EPAM is also a global company. We operate in 50 plus countries today. And so we have built a lot of these tools and put a lot of processes in place to provide this feedback regularly, to be able to track progress and communicate to our employees. But there is always a bias end of the day, because really what you're asking and what we are comparing is in-person interactions against virtual interactions. But I do believe there are few things that companies can put in place. And like I talked about what we do, really align your KPIs to business outcomes. Measuring output and the quality of the output and not hours worked and where you're working from. It would also help to bridge this gap somehow to make sure that there are sufficient team interactions happening, right? Even if it means you would need to fly people who are remote, once or twice a month, so they get together, know their coworkers, their managers, do some team bonding, team activities, go for lunch, dinner, stuff like that. We also at EPAM use things like client visits, or when we do a company, more event-based kind of situations where we bring people into the office and try to somehow make sure that these teams are connecting often.
Right.
And on performance, and this is something we do at EPAM, if I'm looking at having somebody level up or get promoted to the next level, we do this very skill-based. And when you go for an assessment, you are front of a global panel. So it really doesn't matter how much time you have spent, whether it is more or less time in front of your manager. It's really based on the value you're doing on your project, the skills that you have learned. And if you do this, you can get in front of a very neutral panel, get through the assessment, get to the next level. So while there are some challenges here and some biases that we see, I think doing some of these things would go a long way in making sure, irrespective of how and where you're working from, you have good career progression and the right things are being measured around performance.
Right. So you mentioned earlier that you provide support in terms of resources and data privacy to the employees working remotely. So how do you think the leaders can address the concerns around data security, privacy, because cybercrime is increasing so much? So how can leaders address such concerns and provide the necessary company resources in a hybrid work setup?
Yeah, I think you could start by having good, and you mentioned data security, privacy, remote access, right? You need to have these good processes, policies in place for the company to start with. And they need to clearly apply to everybody, whether you're working from home, you're remote. And I think that's a good starting point. Make sure that all your employees are trained and are aware of why all of this is important for the company. See, in EPAM, these are all built into our onboarding program. Every employee goes through this, the do's and don'ts, and signs off. And we conduct these security trainings on a regular basis. Now, obviously, what I didn't mention, it's critical to have the right IT infrastructure in place. And I'm talking good encryption, authentication, remote access, having VPNs in place, using cloud providers. Hopefully, a hyperscaler would help. At EPAM, what we have done is we've implemented a zero trust network model across the organization, right? And for companies that don't have this kind of expertise internally to put these systems in place, probably use a consulting company to do this, because this is critical and you need to get it right. This is really about the company's reputation if you have some kind of a breach that happens. I would also recommend, you go through some regular internal and external audits. Now, certifications is around information security is a good way to start this process. We are ISAE 3402 and ISO 27001 certified. But mostly, and I think this is really, really key, is to make sure that your employees understand why this is important. Continue to create this awareness at every opportunity you get. And clearly all of us need to get this right, because this is critical to what we do, protecting our customer data, protecting IP, and all of that. So here are some of the things. I'm honestly not a network or IT expert, but I think putting some of these in place will certainly help.
Right. So when organizations are transitioning towards the hybrid work setup, the ask of the employers also change. The job descriptions, the recruitment process, the onboarding, everything completely transitions, right? So how does the transition to a hybrid work model affects the recruitment process, talent acquisition, and also the retention strategies of the organizations?
Okay. So on talent acquisition, I think it's clearly, the biggest benefit we got, and I think most companies it applies to, is that it really opened up the whole talent market for us in India. While EPAM in India, we have our offices in Hyderabad, Pune, Bangalore, Gurgaon, and Chennai, but we have hired people in 20 plus states. So the market for IT talent clearly expanded overnight for us, and also for most companies, right? Also at the EPAM, we had started a program called EPAM Anywhere back in 2019. This was before COVID. And this was a program that enabled us to find talent where talent was available, not limiting us to the cities we were operating from. So what we did back then in the very early days is we put a lot of things in place. We had to address information security concerns our clients had. We had to put in place to be able to remotely hire, remotely onboard people, tools and systems, where people could access even if you were not working from our offices. And this really helped us transition quickly. When COVID happened, we went remote, and now we're getting into a hybrid kind of setup. So clearly on talent acquisition, while there are, this applies to all companies, so that you could look at it as a challenge as well. But what benefit we got was really access to talent across India, and we have really, gone after that. And maybe 20% of my workforce is based in cities that I physically don't have an office in today. So in terms of, retention strategies in this kind of environment, again, I keep coming back. We need to be flexible to be able to retain this talent. If I look at EPAM and the kind of talent that I go after, I need to provide this flexibility, or very likely they will find it in other product companies, startup companies, and so on. So even today, we do not mandate return to office. There is no, you have to come in 2 days, 3 days in the office. What we do is we encourage our employees to be in the office at least 2 days a week. Now, clearly, this could change on how things play out over the next few months. But really, we will always be fully remote in some areas, working at clients' location in some areas. And as long as we are flexible, willing to rotate people if they have a challenge to come into the office or go to the customer locations, are options that we are still exercising. And I truly believe it is helping us retain talent. Also, all the retention strategies companies had around, prior to this whole COVID and work from home and hybrid situation still applies today. You still need good career growth, compensation, reward and recognition, benefits programs. All of these are valid. You just need to tweak this a little bit, adapt it to a hybrid workforce. So as long as you kind of understand that people are in this difficult situation, they maybe need some times for their families. If you can empathize, support, and I think most of these things will apply. What we have done over the last couple of years is we have started to provide coaching, mentoring, certification programs, training programs to make sure employees are constantly upskilling themselves. And we have built and put formal platforms in place to make this happen. We have also created over the last couple of years a lot of online kind of interactive platforms, around community. We have a platform called Contribute, EPAM Garage, which is our innovation lab. And we've also launched courses that will help people who are fully remote, kind of lead them to certification. So they kind of see end benefit. And then, we continue to do in-person engagements, both to our employees and their families, a lot of things around well-being, hobby clubs, community events, and so on. So again, to summarize this, not very different. You just need to adapt all the programs that we're working for you into this very new, little bit challenging environment, but flexibility, understanding, able to empathize a little bit with what people are going through. I think you can retain people in this environment.
So as you mentioned about empathizing, so, you already mentioned team cohesion activities that EPAM is doing, also how they've created communication platforms for better communications. But don't you think communication is better when the employees are working on site as compared to hybrid? And also my second part of the question is, today managers, it is very important for managers to have a listening leadership quality, right? Also to have compassion towards employees, to be empathetic, to give an emotional support to the people working virtually. So how can the HR leaders or the professionals work towards that? How can they instill values of empathy and emotional quotient into the managers today?
Yeah. I'm not going to get into, is in-person being co-located more productive than when you're remote, right? Clearly it is. I mean, there are advantages if you can get your whole team in a room working, forever. But reality is we're going to end up in some kind of a hybrid work environment. While I talked about flexibility, so in terms of team cohesion, I think getting the teams together on a regular basis for face-to-face meetings, as much as the company or business can afford, goes a long way for this, right? This is really about team bonding, team understanding each other, and so on. We have rolled out an RTO engagement toolkit. This really helps our managers and employees, kind of set and agree on very clear communication guidelines. Feel free to define their own ways of working. That end of the day, we don't have, this is how people need to work. Meet with the team, understand what the customer requirements are, understand what value we're trying to provide the customers, and figure out how best to work to achieve those things. So there will always be some remote and in office. So I think it's important that the managers make the remote employees feel like they are part of the group, to include them in the decision-making process. And like we talked about, right, to have that understanding, flexibility. This is what we are trying to help our managers deal with. Again, I mentioned to make this a little easier, good communication, collaboration tools are important. We use Microsoft Teams. We encourage our employees to switch on video whenever possible. We have these quarterly team outings. These are kind of offsite events, which outside of work related, there are also a lot of team building activities in place. And then, start to recognize and celebrate achievements from what the team is doing. We have a global heroes, which is like our recognition portal, where any employee can assign a badge to acknowledge an achievement of their team member, the manager, their colleague, or just say thank you. One of our flagship programs is called Culture of Togetherness. And this is, 5 years and running quite well, I would say. This is what brings a lot of our people together, connects a lot of our people together to interact. There are games, there's sporting events that we run, there are hobby classes, and many more events that we do under this umbrella of culture of togetherness. So I don't know if I have to summarize this, having tools to collaborate and engage with everyone, whether you're remote at client's location or in the office, maximizing in-person and team connects as much as you could do, continuing to invest in their upskilling, creating an inclusive environment, inclusive engagement programs. And again, we've repeated this many times, learning to empathize and being flexible, because this is clearly a challenging and, a changing environment. Clearly, we have done many things, and I'm sure as we progress, there will be other best practices, there will be learnings that we will need to adapt. So we need to keep an open mind. We need to collaborate more, and I think all of this, will probably lead to better team cohesion in this kind of hybrid setup we're in today.
Well, you've mentioned some great initiatives that EPAM is taking in a hybrid work setup. Thank you so much, Mr. Reddy, for joining us today and giving us your time. You've shared some great insights, and the viewers are going to enjoy watching this episode. Thank you once again.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Pleasure being here.